Here's something that might bother you. Hiring decisions are not as rational as you think they are. We like to believe that the best candidate gets the job, that it's a clean equation, skills plus experience equals offer. But anyone who's been on the hiring side of the table will tell you the truth. When it comes down to the final 2 or 3 candidates, the qualifications are usually almost identical. On paper, they're interchangeable. So what tips the decision? Small things. Tiny, almost invisible moments that most candidates don't even realize are being evaluated. A specific sentence in your answer. The way you responded to an unexpected question. Something you did in the last 2 minutes of the interview that nobody told you mattered. These aren't the big things. Your resume, your experience, your technical ability. You need those to get in the room. But once you're in the room, the big things are table stakes. Everyone who made it to the final round has them. The small things are what make one person the hire and the other person the really strong candidate we decided not to move forward with. Before we get into it, thanks to InterviewMate for sponsoring this episode. Here's a stat that should matter to you. Most applicants either skip the cover letter entirely or copy-paste the same one for every role. That's your competition. InterviewMate generates a cover letter tailored to the exact job posting. A TS optimized, done in 60 seconds, and specific enough to actually set you apart. One subscription covers every job you apply to. interviewmate.ai/cover-letter. Small thing 1, you answered with specifics when everyone else answered with generalities. This is the single biggest separator in interviews. Most candidates, when asked a question like, "Tell me about a time you led a project," give an answer that sounds something like, "I led a cross-functional project that involved multiple stakeholders and we delivered it successfully." That answer says nothing. It could describe any project at any company by any person. The hiring manager learns nothing about how you think, how you work, or what you actually delivered. Now compare, "I led the migration of our CRM from Salesforce Classic to Lightning. It involved coordinating between sales, marketing, and IT, about 15 people total. We scoped it for 12 weeks, hit some resistance from the sales team around workflow changes, which I addressed by running a series of hands-on workshops. We launched on time with 94% user adoption in the first month." Same question, completely different impression. The second answer has names, numbers, a challenge, a solution, and a result. The hiring manager can see you in the role. They can picture what working with you would look like. They can't do that with generalities. The fix is simple. Before every interview, prepare 3 to 4 specific stories from your experience, each with a clear situation, action, and result. When a question comes, grab the most relevant story and tell it with detail. Not a 10-minute saga, 60 to 90 seconds of specific, concrete narrative. That's what makes a hiring manager write strong examples in their notes instead of "seemed capable but vague." Small thing 2, you asked a question that showed you'd already been thinking about the role. Every interview ends with, "Do you have any questions for me?" And most candidates ask some version of, "What does a typical day look like?" or "What's the team culture?" These are fine. They're also forgettable. Every candidate asks them, they reveal nothing about you. The candidates who get the yes ask questions that show they've already started thinking about the work. Questions like, "I noticed the job description mentions scaling the customer success function. Is that primarily about hiring or about building new processes for the existing team?" Or, "I read about the product launch last quarter. How is the team measuring success on that, and how would this role contribute to that effort?" These questions do something powerful. They put the hiring manager in a future state where you're already on the team. They're no longer evaluating you as a candidate. They're having a working conversation with a potential colleague. That mental shift is subtle, but it's one of the strongest signals a hiring manager can feel. It's the moment where the interview stops feeling like assessment and starts feeling like collaboration. Prepare 2 or 3 of these questions before every interview. Pull them directly from the job description, the company's recent news, or the interviewer's own LinkedIn profile. The investment is 10 minutes of research. The return is disproportionate. Small thing 3. You acknowledged what you didn't know, and it made you more credible, not less. There's a moment in many interviews where a question lands and you don't have a perfect answer. Maybe they ask about a tool you haven't used. Maybe they describe a scenario you haven't encountered. And in that moment, most candidates do one of 2 things. They bluff or they freeze. The candidates who get hired do something else. They say, I haven't worked with that specific platform, but here's how I'd approach getting up to speed, and here's a parallel from my experience that's closely related. That answer does three things at once. It's honest, which builds trust. It shows self-awareness, which signals maturity. And it demonstrates problem-solving, which is often more relevant to the role than the specific knowledge gap itself. Hiring managers don't expect you to know everything. They expect you to be honest about what you don't know and resourceful about how you'd close the gap. A candidate who gracefully handles a gap is more impressive than a candidate who awkwardly pretends the gap doesn't exist. Because bluffing is obvious. It's always obvious. And once a hiring manager catches you bluffing on one thing, they start questioning everything else you said. Honesty with a forward-looking bridge is one of the most underrated interview skills. Practice it. Small thing 4. You made the interviewer feel heard. Interviews feel like they're about you, the candidate. But the best interviews are actually conversations. And in a conversation, making the other person feel heard is one of the fastest ways to build rapport. Many interviewers give context before they ask something. They'll say, we've been struggling with cross-team alignment since the reorg, so I'm curious. Most candidates skip right past that and answer the literal question. The candidates who stand out acknowledge the context first. That makes sense. Cross-team alignment after a reorg is always one of the hardest things to get right. In my last role, we went through something similar, and here's how I approached it. That 2-second acknowledgement, that makes sense, signals that you're listening at a level most candidates aren't. You heard what they're actually worried about, not just what they formally asked. Small thing 5, you sent a follow-up that referenced something specific from the conversation. Most candidates send a thank you email after the interview. Most of those emails say some version of, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation and I'm very excited about the opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you. That email is fine. It's polite. It's also identical to every other thank you email the hiring manager received that day. It does nothing to reinforce why you're the right choice. The candidates who tip the decision in their favor send something different, something specific, something like, Hi Sarah, thanks again for the conversation today. I especially enjoyed our discussion about the challenge of scaling the onboarding process. It's a problem I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and our conversation actually sparked an idea I'd love to explore further if I join the team. Looking forward to the next steps. That email takes 90 seconds longer to write than the generic version. But it does something the generic one can't. It reminds the hiring manager of a specific positive moment from your conversation. It recreates the feeling of that exchange, and it plants the idea that you're already thinking about contributing, not just hoping to be selected. One specific reference, one sentence that shows you were engaged. That's the difference between a forgettable follow-up and one that the hiring manager reads right before making their final decision. Let me tie all 5 together because there's a common thread running through each one. Specifics beat generalities. That's it. That's the thread. Specific stories in your answers, specific questions about the role, specific honesty about what you don't know, specific listening to what the interviewer actually said. Specific follow-ups that reference real moments. Every other candidate is being general. General answers, general questions, general thank you emails. When you're specific, you become memorable. And when you're memorable, you become the hire. None of these 5 things require more experience, more qualifications, or more talent. They require 10 minutes of extra preparation and the willingness to be a real person in the room instead of a polished performance. That's a trade anyone can make, and it's the trade that consistently tips the decision from strong candidate to that's the one. Quick reminder, check out InterviewMate at interviewmate.ai/cover-letter. One subscription, unlimited letters, every application covered. Stop sending the same generic letter to every company. Link in the description. Subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.